In the quiet town of Maplewood, Ohio, where secrets lurked behind picket fences and drawn curtains, a little girl carried a truth too heavy for her small shoulders. Ellie Lane, blind since birth, lived in a world of shadows, her senses sharpened to the whispers of a house that held her captive. But she wasn't alone. A golden retriever named Duke became her eyes, her shield, her silent guardian. Their bond, forged in trust and love, would unravel a darkness that threatened to silence her forever. This is no ordinary tale, it's a chilling journey of courage, loyalty, and a dog who refused to let the truth stay buried. Before we step into this heart-wrenching story, hit that subscribe button for K9 Miracle Stories. Because sometimes, a dog's loyalty is the only light in the dark. Tonight, we uncover a story that will grip your heart and leave you questioning. What does it take to break the silence? Maplewood, Ohio, 2022, was the kind of place where everyone knew your name but rarely your story. Tidy lawns stretched across quiet streets, and neighbors exchanged polite waves under the glow of porch lights. In a modest house on Oak Street, 8-year-old Ellie Lane navigated a world without sight. Born blind, she relied on sound and touch to map her surroundings, the rhythmic tap of her cane against hardwood, the faint hum of a kettle on the stove, the soft, steady thud of Duke's paws trailing her every step. Duke, her golden retriever, wasn't just a service dog trained to guide her through physical spaces. He was her anchor in a life that felt increasingly like a cage, his golden fur a beacon in her darkness. Ellie's world was small, confined to the walls of a house that held secrets she could feel but not name. Her guardian, Logan Carter, was Maplewood's golden boy, a charismatic man in his late 30s who coached Little League, volunteered at the church, and charmed every neighbor with his easy smile. To the town, he was a saint, the kind of man who'd help fix a flat tire or bring casseroles to potlucks. But behind closed doors, Logan's smile twisted into something sinister. His voice, so warm in public, turned cold and sharp when the curtains were drawn. Ellie felt the shift in the air when he entered a room, the way his footsteps slowed outside her bedroom door, heavy with unspoken intent. "Duke, you hear it, don't you?" Ellie whispered one night, her voice trembling as she curled against her dog's warm fur. "The way he stops, like he's waiting for something." Duke's ears twitched, his body tense, a low rumble in his throat. He pressed closer, his warmth a shield against the fear that coiled in Ellie's chest. Logan's cruelty was subtle, insidious, a pill slipped into her orange juice that left her dizzy, a grip on her arm that left faint bruises, words that cut deeper than any physical wound. "No one will believe you, Ellie," he'd say, his voice low and mocking. "You're just a blind girl with stories. Who's going to listen to you?" But Duke listened. Every night, when fear stole her words, Ellie buried her face in his fur, whispering truths she couldn't yet speak aloud. Duke's steady breathing was her promise. She wasn't alone. The house on Oak Street was a labyrinth of dread. Doors locked too often, their clicks echoing in the silence. Footsteps paced the hallway too late at night, too close to Ellie's room. Duke became her warning system, his low growls a signal that danger was near. When Logan's shadow loomed, Duke positioned himself between Ellie and the door, his body a barrier, his eyes locked on the man who threatened her. Ellie didn't know how to escape, didn't know who would believe a child over a town hero. But she knew Duke believed her, and that was enough to keep her holding on. One October evening, as rain battered the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance, Ellie sat on her bed, her fingers tracing the worn leather of Duke's collar. The storm outside mirrored the one inside her, a churning mix of fear and resolve. She couldn't keep living like this, trapped in a house where every creak felt like a threat. "We have to tell someone, Duke," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I don't know how, but we have to try." Duke nudged her hand, his wet nose a gentle reassurance. Ellie didn't have a plan, didn't know if anyone would listen, but she had Duke, and that gave her the courage to take the first step. The path to truth would be treacherous. Maplewood adored Logan, his alibis were as polished as his reputation. The system wasn't kind to children like Ellie, especially one who couldn't see her abuser's face. Doubt would be her enemy, skepticism her hurdle. But Duke's steady gaze held a courage she could borrow. As they stepped out into the rain-soaked night, heading toward the police station, the air grew heavy, the storm closer. This wasn't just a walk, it was the beginning of a reckoning. The police station was a small, brick building at the edge of town, its fluorescent lights buzzing in the quiet. Ellie's cane tapped the linoleum floor, Duke's tags jingling softly as they entered. The officer at the desk, a tired man named Officer Daniels, looked up with a mix of pity and skepticism. "What's this about, kid?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. Ellie's heart pounded, her words catching in her throat. She'd rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times, but now, standing here, the weight of it nearly crushed her. "It's about Logan," she said, her voice small but steady. His hurting me." Duke pressed against her leg, his warmth grounding her as she spoke. Daniels leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "Logan Carter, the coach. That's a serious accusation, sweetheart." Ellie flinched at the word, the same one Logan used when he wanted to sound kind. She took a breath, her fingers tightening on Duke's leash. "I know it's serious," she said. "But it's true. Duke knows it's true." The officer's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Ellie, his expression unreadable. He scribbled something on a notepad, promising to pass it along to a detective. As Ellie and Duke left, the rain still falling, she felt a flicker of hope and a shadow of fear. She'd spoken, but would anyone listen? The next morning, Detective Clara Hayes arrived at the station. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, Clara had a reputation for taking on cases others dismissed. She'd seen too many children ignored, their voices drowned out by adults who didn't want to believe. When she read Ellie's statement, something stirred in her, a gut instinct that this wasn't just a child's story. She visited Ellie at home, sitting across from her in the cramped living room, Duke lying protectively at her feet. "Ellie," Clara said, her voice firm but kind, "I'm here to listen. Tell me everything." Ellie hesitated, her fingers twisting in Duke's fur. The words were heavy, each one a stone she'd carried too long. She spoke of the pills, the bruises, the late-night footsteps. She spoke of Logan's threats, his mocking laughter, the way he'd lock her in her room when he left the house. Duke's ears twitched at every mention of Logan's name, his body tensing as if ready to act. Clara listened, her notepad filling with details, her heart breaking for the girl who'd been invisible for too long. "You're brave, Ellie," she said. "And Duke, he's something special, isn't he?" Ellie nodded, a small smile breaking through her fear. "He's my eyes," she said. "And my voice." Clara's investigation began quietly. She interviewed neighbors, teachers, anyone who knew Logan. Most sang his praises, their words painting a picture of a man who could do no wrong. But Clara noticed the cracks, hesitant glances, vague answers about Logan's time at home. She ordered a medical exam for Ellie, and the results were damning. Traces of sedatives in her blood, faint bruises on her arms and legs. The evidence was mounting, but it wasn't enough. Logan was clever, his tracks covered by alibis and charm. Clara knew the courtroom would be a battleground, and Ellie's voice, shaky but true, would need to carry the day. As the case built, Logan's demeanor shifted. In public, he remained the town's hero, shaking hands and laughing off rumors. But at home, his temper flared. Ellie heard it in his voice, sharp and brittle, like glass about to shatter. "You think you can ruin me?" he hissed one night, his footsteps heavy in the hallway. Duke growled, low and steady, his body a shield between Ellie and the door. The next morning, Clara moved Ellie to a temporary foster home, a small apartment across town with a kind woman named Helen Rogers. Helen, a retired nurse with a warm laugh, welcomed Ellie and Duke with open arms, setting up a room with soft blankets and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. For the first time, Ellie slept without fear, Duke curled at her feet. But the move didn't stop Logan. He called the station, claiming Ellie was confused, that her blindness made her unreliable. He spread stories in town, painting himself as the victim of a troubled child's imagination. Some believed him, their loyalty to him unwavering. Others began to wonder, their whispers growing louder. Ellie felt the weight of their doubt, but she held tight to Duke's collar, his presence a reminder that she wasn't alone. Clara, too, felt the pressure. She knew the case hinged on Ellie's testimony, and on Duke, the silent witness who'd seen it all. The Maplewood courthouse was an old building, its wooden benches worn smooth by decades of trials. Inside, The air was thick with Clara's closing argument was a tidal wave, weaving together Ellie's testimony, the medical evidence, and Duke's actions. "This case isn't about a dog," she said. "It's about a girl who found her voice, and a dog who helped her carry it. You have the power to give her justice." The jury retired to deliberate, the courtroom emptying into a tense silence. Ellie sat with Duke, her fingers tracing his collar, her heart pounding. "We did it, didn't we?" she whispered. Duke's tail thumped once, a quiet affirmation. Hours later, the jury returned. The foreman stood, his voice steady. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Logan Carter, guilty on all counts." The courtroom erupted, gasps, murmurs, a sob from Helen in the back row. Logan was led away, handcuffs glinting, his head bowed under the weight of his own lies. Ellie didn't smile, didn't cry. She leaned down to Duke, her voice a whisper. "We did it, Duke. You and me." Duke's tail thumped again, a quiet victory. The truth had won, and a dog had carried it to light. The trial was over, but Ellie's story was just beginning. Helen Rogers, her foster mother, welcomed her and Duke into her home, not as a temporary stop, but as a true sanctuary. The small house on Cedar Lane was a world away from Oak Street. Its walls were painted soft blue, glow-in-the-dark stars twinkling on Ellie's bedroom ceiling. A wooden frame on her dresser read "Ellie and Duke," a gift from Helen's sister. For the first time, Ellie felt safe, the weight of fear lifting like fog in the morning sun. "This is home, Duke," she whispered one night, smiling as she ran her fingers through his fur. "Ours." Duke explored the house with a puppy-like curiosity, sniffing every corner before collapsing on the living room rug with a contented sigh. Ellie's cane tapped the floor as she learned the space, the creak of the third stair, the texture of the couch, the warmth of the kitchen where Helen baked cookies. Helen watched from the doorway, her heart full, giving Ellie the space to breathe. Life found a rhythm. Ellie started second grade at Maplewood Elementary, Duke her constant shadow. The school was kind, the teachers patient, the kids curious but gentle. At recess, Ellie sat under a sprawling oak tree, her fingers tracing the pages of a braille book, Duke's head resting in her lap. Every day at 3:05, he waited by her classroom door, his tail wagging like a metronome. Maplewood began to see Ellie and Duke differently. The trial had shifted something in the town's heart, their loyalty to Logan replaced by a quiet respect for the girl who'd stood against him. At a school hero day assembly, the principal called Ellie and Duke to the stage. "Duke isn't just a service dog," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "He's a hero who gave a girl her voice." The auditorium roared, hands clapping Ellie's shoulders, kids cheering for Duke. Ellie hugged him, her smile small but radiant, her fingers buried in his fur. That fall, at the Maplewood Harvest Festival, Duke wore a sheriff's star on his harness, a gift from the town's veterinarian, Dr. Ellis, who'd followed the trial closely. Strangers approached Ellie, asking to pet Duke, thanking her for her courage. "Ask him first," she'd say, and Duke would sniff their hands, wag his tail, and steal their hearts. At home, Ellie began to open up, sharing not just her pain but her dreams. She told Helen about wanting to write stories, to help other kids like her. Helen listened, her eyes misty, as Ellie's voice grew stronger with every word. "What if Duke gets old, Helen?" Ellie asked one evening, sipping cocoa on the porch, the air crisp with autumn. "What if I'm not brave without him?" Helen set her mug down, her voice soft but firm. "Brave isn't about being fearless, Ellie. It's about speaking, even when your voice shakes. You've done that. Duke just showed you the way." Ellie nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug, Duke's warmth steady at her side. She wasn't fearless, but she was learning what courage meant. Ellie's story spread beyond Maplewood. A letter arrived from the mayor, praising her strength. Another came from the governor, inviting her to a state ceremony for child advocates. Then, an invitation to the National Children's Advocacy Conference in Washington, D.C. Ellie hesitated. She wanted to be Ellie, not a symbol. But Helen encouraged her. "You're not just speaking for yourself," she said. "You're speaking for kids who feel invisible." Ellie thought of Duke, of the nights he'd stood between her and fear. For those kids, she said yes. In June 2023, Ellie, Helen, and Duke flew to DC. The conference hall was vast, its echoes overwhelming, but Ellie's voice filled it. Standing at the podium, Duke at her side, she spoke to a crowd of advocates, social workers, and survivors. "I thought I was invisible," she said, her voice clear and strong. But Duke listened with his heart. "He showed me one is enough to be heard." The crowd wept, applauded, their cheers carrying her words beyond the room. Ellie's story became a beacon, a call for others to listen to the silenced. Back in Maplewood, Ellie's life grew fuller. She started a journal, her fingers flying over a Braille typewriter, pouring out stories of courage and hope. She and Helen began the Duke Project, a non-profit to pair service dogs with foster children facing trauma. By Ellie's 10th birthday, they'd placed 9 dogs, each one a lifeline for a child in need. Photos lined Helen's living room, kids smiling with their dogs, safe at last. Each one was Duke's legacy reborn, a testament to a dog who'd changed everything. But time doesn't spare heroes. Duke's steps slowed, his golden fur graying at the muzzle. Ellie adjusted, using her cane more, giving him time to rest. She carried him now, as he'd carried her, helping him upstairs, guiding him to his favorite spot on the rug. One winter night in 2024, Duke curled by her feet, his breathing shallow, his body too still. Ellie knelt beside him, her hands tracing his fur, feeling his heartbeat fade. "You stayed until I was ready," she whispered, tears falling into his fur. "Thank you, Duke." Maplewood mourned with her. At Duke's celebration of service, held in the town square, Ellie stood tall, her voice steady despite her grief. "He didn't give me his voice," she said. "He helped me find mine." The crowd was silent, their hands resting on their hearts. The Duke Project grew, placing 40 dogs in 2 years. Ellie, now 12, trained handlers, matched dogs with kids, and co-authored a book, Brave Like Duke, with Helen's help. She wasn't famous, she was found, her purpose clear in every child she helped, every dog that stood guard. In spring 2025, Ellie returned to the Maplewood courthouse, not as a witness but as a speaker for a group of law students. Standing where she'd once faced Logan, she spoke with a quiet power. "The truth doesn't break things," she said. "It builds something new." Her words echoed, a lantern for others navigating the dark. Duke was gone, but his light burned in her, in the children she helped, in the dogs that carried his legacy. Ellie's life wasn't perfect. Nightmares still came, memories of locked doors and Logan's voice. But she faced them, her cane tapping a steady rhythm, her heart full of Duke's courage. She kept a photo of him on her nightstand, his sheriff's star pinned beside it. At night, she'd touch it, whispering, "You're still here, aren't you?" And in the quiet, she'd feel his warmth, his strength, guiding her forward. The Duke Project grew, its reach extending across Ohio and beyond. Ellie spoke at schools, shelters, conferences, her story a reminder that courage starts with one voice, one listener. She trained dogs with Helen, teaching them to be anchors, shields, guardians. Each placement was a victory, each child a piece of Duke's heart. Ellie's journal became a second book, Duke's Light, a collection of stories from kids whose dogs had saved them. She dedicated it to him, her silent guardian, whose loyalty had lit the way. Ellie and Duke's story is a testament to the power of loyalty, courage, and a dog's unbreakable heart. Their bond broke the silence, giving voice to a girl the world tried to ignore. Duke wasn't just a dog, he was a hero who showed us what it means to stand for someone, no matter the cost. If this story touched you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to K9 Miracle Stories for more tales of canine heroes who change lives. In the comments, tell us, has a dog ever been your strength in a dark moment? Or what would you say to a child who feels unheard? Let's keep Duke's light shining, one story at a time.